Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you are having a good day, or maybe it's later in the afternoon for you where you are. It's about 2 p.m. here on the west coast of the United States of America. And so you might be like, oh, it's around 5 or something like that. Or some other time, depending where you are around the world, nonetheless. Thanks for being here. I'm going to pin our link to call in. I'm just going to allow people to call in. We haven't done one of these for a while. And to have a conversation for a bit of time. And then we will move on our way. Yes, I have not taken down any of the Liverpool stuff or the colors. Though I'm not in my Liverpool top right now because it's kind of chilly. So I chose not to wear my top. I was going to. I thought about a couple of outfits today. One of them was wearing my Liverpool top. The other one was wearing all black with a beanie. If you get the reference, you know what's up. Might do one of those. Depending on whether I want to do a stream actually dedicated to that. But I got a nice hoodie picture. Don't listen to fraudsters out there. Just saying that individuals like the apostate prophet, individuals like Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy. That guy's definitely fraud. Who has a goatee nowadays is my question. Bring back the 90s, I guess, or the early 2000s. Most of his audience was probably not even born during those years, and the guy has a goatee. If you're going to make certain claims, Mr. Jones, make sure that you got the look to back it up. Just saying. You were hoping they wouldn't be, but they are. They might be up till the new season. No, I don't. They won't be up till the new season. They might be up till the end of the season, depending on how I want to go about it. I'm just enjoying life, man. It's okay. He said I'm not. He doesn't know what the pictures are about. Hit the like button, folks. Maybe we'll get into that conversation. And thanks for being here. Appreciate you guys being here. Sorry for the Monday stream. I told you guys we're gonna get flagged for so many things for that Monday stream. So what I've done is I've just chopped out all the stuff that we got flagged for. There was essentially copyright strikes on it. For those who don't know, copyright strikes are not the same thing as community guidelines violations or whatever. And some copyright strikes, there's different versions, right? There might be a copyright thing where you share the expense. There's a copyright thing where it can't be monetized. And then there are copyright things where you can't even have the video up, which is what we got. Like 4 of them. And so, I knew it was coming, but whatever. So what I've done is, like, if you watch the replay of the stream, if you haven't seen Monday's stream, I've just cut away those segments. So it'd probably be choppy and just jump. But it was a great stream. We enjoyed it. I think the conversation was good. So that's partly why I did it, is just to keep up that stream. So yeah. Again, drop a comment. Link is in the comment section, and it should be pinned. There it is. It's pinned. If anybody wants to call in and have a conversation, ask some questions, maybe we can open up our Bible and look at a couple of things if you guys want to. Or we can just answer your questions here, interact with one another. Definitely can do that as well. Yo, what's up, man? How you doing? My algorithm's been eaten up by All Liverpool content, essentially. Brentford beat Nottingham Forest today, you guys. And that is a interesting move now, considering that Nottingham Forest end up in 6th place, which is outside of the Champions League spots as it stands. Assuming everybody does what they've been doing. But from 3rd to 7th, I would say there's quite a bit of battle going on there. So Chelsea plays Liverpool this weekend. If they win, that's good for them. If they lose, which I hope they do, meaning Chelsea lose, then Nottingham Forest is back in it. Aston Villa might be in it as well, depending how it looks. But some of you guys might not care about that. So Armenia is the land of Noah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like they're having a hard time finishing the season. This guy's in here. He says, up the Chels. Okay, man. Top of the league. Need I remind you? Need I remind you? Even my mug today is red. This wasn't intentional. This was accidental. Meaning I have 3 of these and I just picked this one up because this one was clean. Don't come swinging here, bro. Don't come. Their fixtures are still really nice, but the last few have been abysmal for the run. Yeah, I didn't see the game. I haven't seen the highlights, so that'll be interesting. I was watching a sort of funny video today by Alex O'Connor. And Alex is talking to ChatGPT. And it's really funny if you're nerdy and all that. And what it's about an 18-minute video. He confuses ChatGPT with it's called confusing ChatGPT with an impossible paradox. Basically, it has to do with clapping. And the math of bringing your hands together. It's very interesting. But essentially, ChatGPT goes into this math thing of saying, well, it's virtually impossible to half the distance between your two hands. It's, you can infinitely half them. And whatever, that's not realistically that's not in reality, but in mathematics. And Alex is arguing with it. But one of the things I realized is Alex could be without Alex is a smart guy, but I don't know whether he realizes or not, but that's a pretty solid defense for the universe having a beginning. Because that's the whole actual infinites conversation, or it could be tied into the actual infinites conversation. So it's a big support for the Kalam cosmological argument. So it was, I thought it was interesting that Alex was doing that, and I was like, I wonder. And I haven't looked at the comments. I wonder if it's got 249,000 views. I wonder if anybody in the comment section has said, hey, Alex, do you realize you're arguing for a point in the Kalam cosmological argument? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Not sure. Do you follow American soccer? Yeah, to a certain extent, Sean. I actually had season tickets to one of the Los Angeles teams, LAFC. I had season tickets for me and my son, their initial inaugural season, and then I had to give those tickets up when I moved to Armenia. I wish I had not given those tickets up. What I should have done was keep the tickets, sell the tickets when I was in Armenia, and still hang on to them because now they're a lot more expensive, and I think I would have been grandfathered in And then I could have probably sold the 2 matches against Miami and made up all my money by people wanting to go see Messi play. So, or whatever. I don't know how many games they've played now, but kind of keep up with it. Really good atmosphere. Los Angeles FC has done a good job with the atmosphere it's created. The stadium is like a European stadium. It's built like a European stadium. It's got a really, really nice cop end, essentially, standing only. So, yeah. And I would take the train. Which you don't do, and people just really don't take the train in Los Angeles. But I would take the train to the games because the train was close to my house. It'd get off like 5-minute walk from the stadium. We'd be singing and dancing the entire way there. So it's a really fun experience. Anybody who wants to go watch LAFC play, I would recommend you take the train. Really, really fun with the fans. Was watching someone reviewing a Catholic giving their testimony story. So, Jerome, because I know you are this sort of an individual, you don't have to say testimony story. You can just say testimony because testimony implies a story. Just saying. Because you've corrected me on stuff like this, And the review seemed rather unfair. It feels like you can give a story and be in no-win scenario, no matter what you say. I guess so. I mean, it's interesting because I've seen this happen within Protestant circles, right? I've seen this happen with people, kind of saying, like, hey, look, I was raised in the church. I can't really tell you when I started believing in Christ. I sort of feel like I've always believed in Christ. And then people going like, oh, well, do they really, are they really converted and stuff like that? It's like, well, look at their lives. I mean, they live a Christian life. And I don't know what people are looking for. People might sometimes think that everybody has a similar sort of situation. And I don't see why we can't have situations in which people are parented well and introduced to the faith, and those people come to believe and trust in Jesus from the testimony of their parents, plus other things, but predominantly the testimony of their parents. And then they might not necessarily have like, oh, I fell away, I did all this crazy stuff, and then I came to the Lord and all this stuff. It's like, no, you don't necessarily need to have a story like that. Quite a bit of people do, but you don't need to have a story like that to become a Christian. Like, oh, you must go through this thing where you're not believing or you're rebelling or something like that. I think those things are unnecessary. But it seems to me that a lot of people look for something like that. Now, I'm assuming to know the kind of testimony this Catholic person was sharing and why the individual was reacting. Tell me if I'm off or I know exactly what's going on. Like, just, you can correct me, Jerome, but it seems to me that's what make it unfair. Like, oh no, he's not a real convert because he didn't have these sort of experiences or something like that. So that's a possibility. And I just think people need to realize that we come to know Jesus through different experiences and in different ways. I was a Catholic as a kid, became an atheist, and then went back years later. And the criticism was partially, of course, you went back to Catholicism. You grew up as one and lived amongst them. And yeah, it's just hilarious to me. Oh man, I'm trying to figure out what the problem here is. I mean, if somebody's just sharing a story, that it's not really telling us about the truth of a thing, like a truth of a matter. People are just sharing their experiences. If somebody's like, "Hey, became a Christian because I was high and had an experience on drugs, and then like woke up sober the following day, and like I was just scared, and then came to know Jesus," like what does that mean? Or I was high or drunk or something like that, and God, I felt like God told me that I need to repent. It's like, well, they're not telling us like go get high. That's just their story. That's just sort of what happened. Like how do we judge, I guess, people's story? People's stories are people's stories. People come to know the Lord in various ways. This is a question for Jerome. It's not for me. It was an atheist reviewing the channel. You should have. Then I just like went after on some like random Baptist guy. So what you said wouldn't have been said. That's interesting. Now I'm like, my response is, again, so what? That still doesn't tell us the truthfulness, right, or the falsehood of a thing. It just doesn't. So it's like, oh, you went back to being Catholic. And what's wrong with that? It's the only thing you knew. I mean, it just seems to me that like your conclusion, not yours, but that individual's conclusion is uncalled for. That if people go back to or go to something that they're familiar with, like, oh, you grew up in a Christian country, of course you would be a Christian. Maybe. Well, the majority of people are Christians. And it's funny to me that most of the people that say these things are people who live in like majority Christian countries. And they're not Christians. It's like, well, how come you're not a Christian? It's like, are you saying that you're smarter than me? And sometimes they are. Sometimes they're saying that they are smarter than us. I can answer Jerome random question. What are your thoughts on precept apologetics? So I've been challenged on this. So I'm not a fan of precept apologetics. Let me just say that, at least the way it's been articulated to me. Okay. I like some precept arguments, and I think some precept arguments work really, really well. Also, there's a historical case to be made that, the assumption that all truth is God's truth, the assumption that God exists, therefore we should expect the world to be a certain way, is that. And I suppose if you want to consider that presuppositional apologetics, I know a lot of people don't. I'm okay with it. I prefer a cumulative case approach to things. And the way I've seen it articulated at times to me seems philosophically confused on epistemological questions and ontological questions. But I probably haven't thought about this subject for some time. So, hey, Sean's called in. Let me see if I can bring... Let's see if I can bring him into a cool screen. Here. Oops, not that one. There we are. It's a black screen nonetheless. Sean, what's up, man?
Sup?
I haven't spoken for a while.
Long time no speak.
What's going on? How's the weather?
It's nice. It's gonna be dry now for a week. Unusually warm for this time of year.
Oh, that's cool. I'm glad you guys are seeing some sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's been
So
going on? What you been
I was going
thinking
to
about
talk
and
about.
thinking through?
Well, I was listening to your last video, and you said your best argument now for religion or your beliefs is the moral argument,
Did I?
or the.
I'm just gonna trust you. Okay.
I watched the video of yours last time,
Okay.
and you said the moral argument is one of your favorites now or
Yeah, okay,
something.
that sounds more like me. Like I don't know whether I would say it's the best, but it might be one of my favorite ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So could you explain to me what your beliefs are, the moral stuff?
Well, typically the moral argument is stated as if God didn't exist, there wouldn't be objective moral values. Objective moral values do exist, therefore God exists.
So you need God to have objective morals.
Yes, that's the argument.
But could you also have a God without objective morals?
Could you have a God without objective morals? No, I wouldn't necessarily call
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call that being God. One of the things that philosophers of religion generally agree on, I would say unanimously agree on, but I'll just be safe here. Say generally agree on is that in order for a being to be worthy of the title God, that being would have to have certain attributes. One of those attributes being all good or omnibenevolence. And that would lead us to objective moral values, God having to create a world in a way that represents and reflects his personality and character. So I wouldn't say we could have
Right.
that.
Um, but what about the other people's beliefs, like the Hindus,
Yeah, so
the
that's why I wouldn't
Buddhists?
say that they're worthy of the title God, like with the capital G. And I'm not just saying that,
Yeah.
by the way.
But
There
they
are
could say to you,
atheist philosophers of religion say that as well.
right? So I have a lag. I think I have a lag.
That's okay.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's not just like a Christian argument or something like that. This is just generally for us to have a conversation. When somebody says God, they must mean certain things. So if Hindus by God mean, lower level, let's say lowercase g deities, maybe the way Christians speak about angels, then okay. I mean, what about it? Those don't necessarily have to reflect our, moral kind of values in regards to the objective sense.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, so I have another question that's maybe I have a question for you on the same kind of train of thought. Suppose we take Hinduism as an example. Does Hinduism, like where Hinduism was founded and developed and grew, has it produced a society in which we have objective moral values, in which we have human dignity and human rights, um, or has it produced something else?
Yeah, they have some good things and some bad things. The same with Christianity. I think
But
all
hang on, no, no,
religions
no.
have good things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not you're too quickly going by it, and I'm not trying to like up one you, but like just genuinely look at Hinduism and the culture it's created.
Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of the things like the caste system, the
Correct. So it's created the
what else
caste
do they
system.
have?
Yeah. So
Misogyny.
so what is the caste system?
Their beliefs are that some classes are should stay poor forever or something, or reincarnation, something to do with
Mm-hmm.
reincarnation. I don't know exactly how it works.
Yeah. So it's generally the idea that if you're born in a certain caste, you stay in that caste because the reason you're in that caste is because karma has determined you to be in that caste as a form of punishment or reward. So if you're born poor, that means you're being punished. essentially. If you're born rich and wealthy, that means you're being rewarded for your past lives or life. But see how that's a religious system that's produced that. That's just one of the things. Does that seem like a fair, morally objective kind of system to you?
No, I disagree with that system, but
Yeah, but
it's changing. I heard
why do you
India is getting
disagree?
more secular, I think.
Yes, yeah, it is changing. You know,
Well,
secularism
it's my
is like
subjective values that say.
historians think secularism is a rise out of Christianity.
Well, yeah, a lot of the morals that Westerners have is from Christianity.
Yeah,
But we got rid of the Old Testament laws, like so all the morals. Christianity, we got rid of a lot of laws from Christianity. To be fair, now like gay stuff, women's rights. That was probably all in the Bible that said that women were. So we have kept the good parts of Christianity. We
who
got rid of
has
the bad
kept it is my
parts.
question. It's the secularists.
Yeah, the woke ones.
Sean, are you like pro LGBTQ and all that stuff?
Yes.
You are. And explain to me the reasoning
Well,
behind
the
all
trans
that
stuff,
stuff.
I'm not too. The the sports and the kids getting transition, maybe not
Yeah,
100%, but you know,
I understand.
I'm probably, yeah.
Yeah, you do realize that our society is moving in a way where moral judgments are disappearing. Like you said something about Indian society and how you disagree with the way they have it set up. Like that's your opinion and you're entitled to it, I guess. I don't even know whether we could argue in a purely secular society whether you are entitled to your opinion. Because if your opinion, for example, am I entitled to my opinion in regards to the LGBTQ and all that stuff?
Yeah, that's the problem with being too woke. If you're too
Yeah.
woke, you're open to all the bad ideas, and then the bad ideas can take over.
And that's the question. I guess that's the statement you made is that you're too open to it. Because the moral.
I'm not open. I'm
I know.
open, but
I'm
I'm
not saying
not that
you
open.
particularly. I'm not saying you particularly. I'm just talking like the
The liberals, the super
sure.
lefties that think that Muslims are fine, everything's fine,
You have to
or the
drop moral object.
postmodernists.
You have to drop moral objective values because they no longer get grounded. And because they're not
Yeah,
grounded, they become matters of opinion, societal conjecture, or something like that, societal agreement, and they result in us accepting everything. So even the fact, like you said, as a secularist, you said something like, "Well, I disagree with like Indian society and the way it's set up and stuff." Like, there's people who would be like, "You can't say that. Who do you think you are to judge their society?" Um, and I think we can because we have objective moral values, and objective moral values are given to us, you could say, I think I'm fine with that kind of language, by God, or we have them as a result of the existence of God. And so I can say this is a bad society, or this culture is ill-formed. And I wouldn't say everything about every culture is wrong, but definitely we could look at cultures and say, wow, that's a horrendous way of doing things. Don't do it. And then make an argument for it. But that's because God exists. That's because we can have use a foundation on where we're speaking from, where it's not just my opinion or your opinion or society's opinion, because society changes as people change. Like you were saying, oh, we've dropped these old things. Now we're okay with these things. Okay, so how okay are we going to be with everything? Like, is the advancement and progress of society in such a way where we just become okay with more and more things? Because it seems to me that's where secularism is leading us. Very much because they've given up objective moral values.
Yeah. Um, no, I still think that uh, morals. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on philosophy and moral stuff, but I think morals are subjective. So even if we had everybody was Christian, you would still have different opinions of Christianity and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Morals as well.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you
So,
think?
well, the fact that you're saying they're subjective tells me that you can't really say statements like a certain society or a certain behavior is incorrect. But I think you would be contradicting yourself. If I were to bring up certain scenarios, you would definitely say they're wrong. You wouldn't just say it's my opinion they're wrong. You would say they are heinous acts that should be punished. And by saying that, you're
Say that
essentially
again.
agreeing with me. Like if I brought up scenarios and I told you, do you think this is morally, objectively always wrong? There are things that you would say yes to.
No, I mean,
Do you
obviously,
think do you
murder.
think genocide can ever be
The,
justified?
well, we kind of did it during World War II. We genocided
No,
Germans.
no, we didn't. That's not what genocide
Or
means.
we genocided the Japanese a bit.
No, you have to look up the definition of genocide.
All right. Okay, well, genocide. Yeah, obviously the
Okay,
law says that
I'll use
genocide is
another one
never
that might
really.
that might get me in trouble on YouTube. Do you think rape could ever be right?
No,
No.
I don't think rape
Yeah.
is ever justified.
Ever. You can't think of any situation ever where it would be justified, and you are right to think so, which means you don't think morality is subjective. You think it's objective, and that's at least one thing that is objectively wrong all the time. And I would say you're right in thinking so, but you don't have the right system that's producing that kind of thinking. So you're saying at face value that, I'm a subjectivist, but in reality, you're not. Because I don't think anybody in reality is a subjectivist. Now, there are people that will bite the bullet and say yes.
Yeah, well, obviously it's that those what do they call those games that you can play there with the train tracks, and you choose. You always have a choice, I guess, but
Are you thinking about the
I
trolley
always think that
problem?
trolley problems and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
but see,
But
those are like more like moral paradoxes and stuff like that. Like we're talking about real life situations. I'm giving you real examples that go against what you're articulating. You're saying, "Oh, I believe morality is subjective," and I give you one example, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I think that's always wrong." Like, okay, so that you think it's objectively wrong? Yes, I always think it's wrong always. It's like, okay, so you're not like you're a moral subjectivist on some stuff, but you're definitely not a subjectivist on this thing. And I'm pretty sure I can come up with a list of 5 to 10 things that you would objectively think are wrong all the time.
right,
Because I think you're a human
there's a
being.
scale.
You
Like
know better.
it goes. It's a scale from really bad to really good, and then there's in between. But
Like what? Give me an example.
you can't be yin yang all the time.
Yeah, but give me an example where like in this regards to this scale.
Well, obviously the extreme things like gay stuff that doesn't have to be black or white. What else? Uh, Eating meat or fucking what else?
So
There's a lot of
seems
moral
to me
problems
that
that humans face
seems
that
to
are
me that
not
you're
always black and white.
yeah. Seems to me that you're conflating a couple of things. Like eating meat is not a moral category.
Well, for the vegans, it is.
because vegans elevate animals to the stature of human beings, which is they redefine what an animal is. So they use language like murder towards animals, which shouldn't be applied because that's not murder. And by redefining it, then they bring it up into a moral category. Even vegans believe in moral objectivism. It's funny, isn't it, that most of the vegans that you meet are absolute relativists. They don't even realize that they're moral objectivists. I didn't say all, by the way. I said most.
Right.
So this is the
Yeah,
way
but you're objective.
generally this is the way that people who commit like heinous crimes, what they do is they will devalue the humanity of the individual in front of them, and so therefore give them the justification to act in the ways they want to act towards them. But they have to do that because even the people who are doing the evil are moral objectivists. And you're a moral objectivist, Sean. I don't think you're a relativist when it comes to morality.
Yeah, okay, let's say hypothetically everybody's a moral objectivist. We'll still have different opinions, though, of what is right and wrong.
Well, we can have moral opinions on a number of things. Not every single thing is necessarily a moral category. And that's why we have conversations. But that still doesn't deny the fact that we're all moral objectivists.
Sorry, what does that mean, moral category? I'm not a very...
Well, there are things that would fit like non-moral categories.
Such as?
Like you can eating meat, I would say could be a preference unless you change the moral, like you shift the goalposts, right, to a certain extent. So you elevate animals to a certain extent, you call it murder, and then you go, nobody should eat this. But I would say, look, I have friends that are vegans, by the way. I have friends who don't eat meat. I have friends that have been and are pescatarians. They only eat fish. So, like, but those are not moral categories. They're not putting them in moral categories. They say, I don't prefer it. I don't like it. I don't like the taste of it. I even have friends that don't eat animals because of the modern kind of farming system in the United States. But that's still a moral argument, is my point. That one is a moral argument because what they're saying is there's unethical farming systems. So they're not against eating animals per se. They're against the way animals are treated, meaning they should be treated in a humane way. Even if we're going to eat them, they ought to be treated in a responsible fashion. And I have a sympathy towards that, and I agree with it on many grounds. And then, so they make a case of not being like that. It's still a moral argument, but some of them aren't. Like, if I don't like the taste of chicken, I don't eat chicken. That's equivalent to me not eating strawberry ice cream or anything else. So it would be a non-moral category. It's just preference.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's things that some of the things we're talking about are absolutely moral categories. They cannot be placed in the subjective sense, like, oh, it's vanilla or chocolate or something like that. Like the example I gave. You can't ever come up with that and say, well, you know what? Yeah, it's a preference. Depends. So the question becomes towards someone like you is, why do you live? Why do you act with moral objectivism on some issues and then yet deny it at the same time? I just don't think you should deny it. You should say you're a moral objectivist and you don't have reasons as to why we should be moral objectivists. Like, you don't have a grounding of it, but it's the way we should be. Does that make sense? You there, Sean? Can't hear you, so you've muted yourself. I hope this makes sense to our audience who are both believers and not. Let me know, guys, if you guys got comments in the chat. Tom has a good memory, and he says, Sean, we had this debate a year and a half ago. Wow, this guy's memory is really good. On this channel. Seems like your view has stayed pretty much the same. Well, one can only hope. Jerome says Arthur clearly hasn't had enough of YouTube rushing him this week. I'm confused about this question, Jerome. Rushing me, or am I rushing Sean? I don't think I've rushed Sean. I like this comment by Ivan. He says a lot of vegans I've seen support abortion. This is true. I've seen this as well. Make it make sense. You can't. Well, well, you can make sense. You can make sense of it this way. They elevate animals to the stature of human beings, and then they devalue worth of unborn humans to nothing. Okay, so Sean's internet's cut off. Thanks for that, Sean. Thanks for the question. You said the bad YouTube working. Yeah, well. This guy's memory is way better. What's up, Zach? How you doing? Agape, what's going on? K-Dub, what's going on? YouTube will hurt my video. I don't know, I just saw a bunch of people jump in here, so hey, hit the like button, folks. Thanks for being here. It's Thursday. It's kind of cold. The highest we're going to get here in Southern California is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. For your European viewers, whatever that is in Celsius. We got our good brother, the very Reverend Nick Quint in the house. How you doing, Nick? Thanks for being here. Apologia Center sounds really familiar. Apologia Center sounds really familiar. I've heard this before. I agree with Tom. Now I feel weird. I like that. He feels weird for agreeing with Tom. There you go. Apologia Center, bringing people together, one step at a time. Look at that. Dolphin says, hello, all the Apologia apprentices. Wow. Interesting language there. Interesting language. I appreciate that. Fight Club every week. We haven't done Fight Club for a while. I mean, I could change the title of this into something like a lot more clickbaity. Arthur, it's May. It is May. We get mead and meat this month. Yes, we do, good sir. Yes, we do. Hey, Blake, how you doing? I know there were talks about a Bible study group on Patreon. There still is, bro. There's like that hasn't left my mind. I just need more people to respond for me to arrange that. Wasn't sure if there's an update, but would love to get involved. Again, what I will do is we've had a number of people join our Patreon recently. And so what we'll do is I'll send out another message letting everyone know that we want to have a Bible study. And if anybody's interested, let us know. Blake, I don't know whether you've watched the videos that I already have on there on Ecclesiastes, but in the time being, I would recommend you watch some of those studies. Come on now, let's go, baby. Let's go. Let's go. Nolan has discovered a love for soccer. Should I get him hooked on Liverpool? Absolutely, man. Absolutely. You know what? He's got to hang out with my kids. That's the way to do it. Get him around my kids. Is the transcendental argument for God actually strong? It could be. I mean, man, I haven't thought about the transcendental argument in some time, bro. From what I can remember, I would say something like yes. Sean, are you there?
So Yeah, sorry for that. I think my
That's
better
okay.
better internet now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hear me? Yeah. So you, I was talking about, so if everybody had the same beliefs as you did, as you have,
Hmm.
uh, would you objectively say that everything would be better, in your opinion?
Yes, I
Will you
would
give me an
absolutely say
example?
that. Give you an example. Um, yeah, Western society, Sean. Do you think the world
If
is a
Western
better place? Do you
society,
think do you think the world is a better place today than it was when Christianity started?
yeah, but it's not all because of Christianity that the
It's
world is a better place now.
it is mostly because of Christianity. I mean,
Mm,
again,
yeah.
this is not a
Okay.
Christian argument. Tom Holland, we've Christian apologists have mentioned Tom Holland so many times that I don't know whether you've seen anything from Tom Holland or read his stuff. Tom Holland is, as far as I know, unless he's changed his view, an atheist historian. He's a Greco-Roman historian, and he says the reason why we have the society that we have, the way we treat women, the way we treat children, is because of Christianity. This wasn't always the case. In the Greco-Roman world, this is not the way children were treated. The fact that you and I agree and think that children have value and ought to be treated well is an argument from Christianity. Everybody in the world doesn't agree with that. And I think for those of us that are in the West, for those of us who've grown up in the West and have Western values, we sort of forget this. We have like a collective amnesia, thinking secularism is the thing that's given us these things, or thinking that utilitarian ethics is the thing that's given us this, and it hasn't. These are based on arguments that's come out of Christianity. These are things that's come out of Christian philosophy and theology. Things like natural law theory developed by Thomas Aquinas. And variations of that, even divine command theory. So, folks say these things and we act in these ways, but they forget that there is a heritage that we have, and the world wasn't always like this. And then there are countries in the world today where this is not the case. It's very important for us to realize that these things didn't just like randomly evolve from nowhere.
Well, I did watch a video debunking Tom Holland. I think Rationality Rules there did a video there about him, and he said that there was beliefs before that, like Stoicism, what else? Buddhism. They were much older than Christianity that kind of had the same beliefs as Christianity,
Rationality
morals
Rules
as Christianity.
debunked Tom Holland's historical arguments.
Well, like he criticized it, but he
Well,
didn't.
that's
I went to
yeah. I
debunked.
can see why he would criticize that. I want to
Yeah.
yeah yeah.
But anyway, he
Partly
was basically
because
saying that there's loads of other beliefs
hang on,
that have
this is
similar.
Christianity's favorite skeptic. As him and I agree on this, that Christians have spoken about him for a while. Let's see how a non-believer became Christianity's favorite historian, Tom Holland. This guy cut his hair. Wow, he looks a lot better with shorter hair. Yeah, I can see why he would go in regards to that. But he's all like he's pro everything you can think of under the sun, isn't he?
No, he criticized the transgender movement, so he's not all that woke. He
Did
is
he?
vegan though.
Stephen, who runs Rationality Rules, criticized
Rationality.
transgenderism.
Yeah, he they were
Oh,
fighting each other in the atheist community because he was skeptical about transgender stuff or something. I
oh,
forgot. I don't
props to
exactly
him.
know.
Good for him. Very good.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
but I think he changed. He went back to more pro trans or something.
The way you frame that.
Okay, not props to him, I guess. Look, again, it's fine to criticize things, but we can't deny historical developments.
Yeah, but do you agree that morals change, that progress happens?
Um, Maybe. Like I'm not necessarily against that. I don't know whether I would say it's morals that change. I don't think moral rules change. I think in my view, I distinguish between ethics and morality. And this is why when you're in university and you take a class on ethics, you're going to take multiple classes. You're going to take like more of the classes that deal with ethical theories and the different ethical theories we have that we can apply, and you look at more in the practical sense of ethics, right? So maybe some of those, maybe we haven't come across situations. Maybe there are things that we haven't come across. I'll give you an example, like the ethics behind AI technology. Like this isn't something that we thought about 500 years ago or 100 years ago. Maybe we thought about it in some theoretical senses, but in a very real sense, we have to think about it and apply proper moral categories to figure out where we're going to stand on these things.
So I'm new here. What is the difference between morals and ethics?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like for me, morality is the sort of thing that doesn't really change. Ethics would be more in a category of applying it. And again, that's not a scientific or a philosophical definition of those terms.
What do
But
the
just to help us out,
philosophers say about
I don't.
ethics and
I would
morals?
have
What's
to.
different?
I'd have to pull up one of my dictionaries of philosophy books off the shelf and read that to you. I don't know. Let's
So
see.
ethics is like laws. It's
You know,
not.
let's ask the AI
It
to tell us
changes.
this. No. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say ethics is necessarily laws. Let me see. Recently, I've been asking Grok things, which is so define the difference between morals and ethics as a philosopher. So here's what ChatGPT says. As a philosopher, the distinction between morals and ethics is subtle but meaningful and often debated. Here's a nuanced definition. Morals refer to the personal principles or values held by an individual or community about what is right and wrong. They are often shaped by culture, religion, upbringing, and conscience. Morals are prescriptive. That means you prescribe them in nature. They tell us what we ought to do. Ethics, on the other hand, is the systematic and philosophical study of those moral principles. This is a way better definition than the one I gave, by the way. Ethics seem to analyze, justify, or critique moral beliefs through reasoned arguments. In this sense, ethics is reflective. It asks why something is considered right or wrong and whether that judgment is coherent or justifiable. In short, morals are what people believe to be right and wrong. Ethics is the philosophical inquiry into those beliefs. That's a very good definition and analysis of morals and ethics. So morals are the things that exist when we do ethical theory, and this breaks down into two parts within ethics, but we study those things and then we talk about it in an applied sense. So for example, what are the ethical kind of ways a lawyer ought to act, and what are the ethical ways a doctor should act, right? And some of those might not be necessarily moral categories, like by nature. So if I get rushed, for example, if I get rushed to the hospital, and I have a wound on my face, this is real situations that people deal with. But could they shave my beard? Are they allowed to shave my beard? What would you say?
Well, if you had a belief that said if you cut my beard, I'm going to hell, then they'll probably go, don't cut his beard.
Would they let me die?
Um, Okay, well then they'll have to ask you, and then if you can't answer, then they'll just cut your beard anyway. But then you'll go
Suppose
to hell.
suppose they
Your own
could save
beliefs.
my life. Suppose they could save my life. Do they not have a moral obligation to save my life?
Yeah, if they had a high likely chance of, yeah,
Yeah,
obviously, yeah. But this is a belief thing. So if someone believed that if you cut my beard, I'm going to hell,
they'd
but
still
then you
save my
had
life. They'd still save my life.
yeah,
You know, I'd probably,
yeah, it's
they'd
all.
probably end up getting sued or something like that, but they probably lose that because the way it would get judged is that their job as doctors, their moral responsibility is to save lives. It's not necessarily to honor your deeply held religious beliefs, whatever they may be.
So that's what they have there with the Jehovah's Witness, I think. Is that what they probably
Yeah,
have there?
blood transfusion. Yeah, but
Yeah,
they've denied it, and people have died as a result.
yeah.
But there are other religions that are, that are against like shaving and cutting off their hair and
Oh
stuff like
yeah, is
that.
that the what they call the Sikhs?
Um, I'm not sure whether it is kind of disallowed. I know they can't cut their hair, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
but the
So
beard, I'm
I would
not
say
sure.
yeah, maybe with the beard. I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah.
but even within Islam, even within Orthodox Judaism, but you can always then
But
this is where you get all the kind of analysis of these things, which is when you do the ethics. So morals exist. You and I agree on the existence of morals. That's my point. But if you're going to deny God, I think as a result, you're going to essentially have to deny that morals are objective. And so when you do the ethical studies, you fall, sort of victim to relativistic ethics.
yeah, but I could make up a religion and say that my morals are objective and they're different than yours. You would have
Yeah.
what would be the best way to
Morality
prove
goes
both?
beyond religion. Like,
Yeah, but you said you need a God to have objective morality.
correct. I didn't say you need religion.
Yeah, but I can make up a different God, an all powerful
Go
God
ahead.
that's totally different,
Go ahead. Let's try it out.
and have different morals than yours. How would you disprove me?
Okay, go ahead. Let's try it out. Okay, say
Well, I
Sean is
can make up
developing.
a God.
Sean makes
I
up a
could say
god.
Zeus. Zeus is the all powerful God,
Okay, he's all
and I
powerful.
have different beliefs and morals than you.
Hang on.
And how would you?
Is Zeus all powerful in your view?
Yeah, he's all
Okay,
good, all
he's
powerful,
all
all that.
good. He's all good.
Yeah.
What else is he?
Well, that's it. Like that's all you need. All good, all
That's not
powerful.
all you need. Is he
And
all
I and
knowing?
I and I have different beliefs.
Is he all knowing?
Sorry.
Is he all knowing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so all powerful, all good, all knowing. Okay,
But I
is
have
he
different morals than
is
you.
he everywhere? Can he be everywhere?
Yes.
Okay, all
All the
present,
stuff that you
all
have, I
present.
copy you.
Okay,
I copy all your stuff, but
okay,
I just have different morals.
okay. What are
How
the
could you
morals you
disprove
have?
me?
Um, it, it,
Well, I have bad morals, basically.
okay.
But how would you disprove me?
Well,
Oh no, I
I
have
would
good morals. Sorry.
argue.
I
So
have good morals, but I have a different God.
um I'm confused here. Is it a bad morals or good morals?
No, good morals, but I have my God is totally different than your God.
Okay,
The same morals as you.
are we still calling this god Zeus?
Yeah.
Okay, so this Zeus is all powerful, all good, all knowing, all present, and agrees with me on all the moralities that I have when it comes to God.
It's basically God. Same thing.
Exactly.
So, no, but it looks different. No. Okay, let's say I have different morals. Okay, I have different morals than you. So I'm very liberal. Okay,
Okay.
but I believe in God. Okay, how would you disprove me? How would you disprove my God and my
You
beliefs?
believe in God, but Well, the question might sometimes come down to something like revelation. So if somebody says, "Well, I believe in God," I go, "Okay, cool. Tell me more about the God that you believe in," and then we'll go from there. So that might take a longer conversation. So if the person that I'm having a conversation with says, "The God that I believe in doesn't get involved in human affairs," or something like that, you go, "Okay, cool. Are there moral standards that this guy wants us to live by?" And the answers to those questions would determine the nature of our conversation or the direction of our conversation.
Well, my God, has all the miracles. How could you disprove me now? I got
Well,
revelation
it seems to
from
me that you're
Zeus.
just borrowing my view and then trying to use it against me.
Well, this is what Islam. This is what a lot of religions do. They copy each other and they make shit up.
Okay,
But the thing is, I think the best way to find the truth is through the scientific method, and
yeah, but
that's
the science
the
can't help us
best
when it
way
comes
to
to
debunk me.
morality. Science can't help us when it comes to morality. You know why?
I'm not sure about that.
So let me ask you a
You can
question.
use scientific
So
method to see which is better. Ethics.
can a scientist do experiments on only Jewish children to see if there's a difference? And doing the experiment means they die. To see if their skulls are differently formed than the rest of ours.
Sorry, if the experiment and they die, the kids die.
Yeah, every time they do the experiment, the kid has to die.
But they find out that the kids have different brains.
No, just different skull sizes or shapes.
So you have to kill them to find that they're special, that we chosen people.
Yeah.
But that's what
Should
Mengele did, or that's what the Nazis did. Well, I think
I'm
the
glad
Nazis
that you
were.
caught on to my example. I wasn't trying to make it. I wasn't trying to make it sneaky. I was trying to use a legitimate example.
The Nazis were religious, though. They weren't atheists. So
yeah, but what I'm saying
obviously,
is,
I'm just saying that there's a lot of crazy beliefs out there. Obviously,
Sean, the
could be
problem
wrong,
is that
I think
hang on,
scientific method.
Sean, the problem is that you would have a ethical view as to whether scientists should or should not do certain things. There is a ethical way we ought to do science. We presuppose ethics when we do science. We don't just give it a free-for-all. That's just not the reality. That's not the way science is done. Scientists presuppose ethics.
So the critique of ethics is using the scientific logic and all the philosophical stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, science has to presuppose. Science is a sort of discipline that needs to presuppose certain things in order for it to function. For example, it presupposes uniformity. It presupposes the existence of order. It presupposes the existence of numbers. There's a lot of stuff. Ethics. So science cannot study ethics. It is not a category. Science. I've talked to you about this before. You have to give this up, brother. You really have to give up scientism. It is a debunked, bankrupt view. It really is.
Okay, no. Okay, you could be right there. Let's go back to what I was saying. So I have a different religion, different God.
Mm-hmm.
How would you disprove me? Using
well, it depends
philosophy?
What you're saying. So far, all you've said is all the stuff that I say. So that all you're doing is saying it's different.
I got a miracle.
Yeah, but you're not telling me how it's different.
Well, my morals are different.
Okay, tell me what's so different about them. Like, give me examples. So Christianity says you
shouldn't
murder.
Basically, I'm liberal. I'm left-leaning, liberal.
Okay, but Christianity says, forget the liberal stuff. Christianity says you shouldn't murder people. Does your religion say you should? It's okay.
Okay, I would murder in case. See, this is a tricky one now. Murder. Well, abortion.
Murder by definition.
Gray area.
Hang on. Murder by definition is the unjustified killing or taking of life.
Yeah, okay. I would not agree with that.
Yeah, okay. So tell me nothing. Like, it seems to me that you're just going to agree on all the major categories when it comes to morality.
No, just to go quickly, I'll be liberal, basically, on my moral stuff.
Yeah, because see, the liberal conservative conversation is more of a conversation about revealed truth, not necessarily about kind of the state of the universe. So like when you talk about Christians who are liberal and Christians who are conservative, the conversation becomes about the interpretation of texts. But if you don't have the text, if you and I are not in agreement on the text, then okay, then I got to look at more of the details of your, religion's claims. So like instead of inventing one, because you'd probably have a very, very hard time doing this, is if you adopt something like Islam. And then we would talk about the details within that. It's like, oh, what are the moral categories in which we disagree and agree? And you're still going to come up with moral objectivism. You're never coming up with moral relativism. Because anytime you presuppose a God, it's going to be moral objectivism. And then now me and the Muslim can have conversations about revealed truth. We can have conversations as to whether their revelation is true or whether mine is true. But that's a conversation about revelation that actually exists. And that's what you can't produce, essentially, because you can't give me a revelation. I'm not going to sit here and wait for you to.
What do you mean about revelation?
Well,
is this like miracle stuff?
No, we both believe that God has revealed himself to us, that God's given us a written document.
Yeah, but that's a miracle, isn't it?
I mean, to the Muslim it is, sure, but it doesn't necessarily.
But if you get a revelation, isn't that like supernatural?
Yeah.
Basically, I could say I get supernatural visions. How could you disprove me?
Oh, we'll talk about what those visions are. I don't necessarily.
Okay, well,
I'm not necessarily going to say you don't get new like I actually think Muhammad had a lot of supernatural experiences. I don't deny his supernatural experiences.
So do you think Muhammad actually talked to God or Satan?
No, I think Muhammad talked to beings that he thought might have been God.
So they were demons.
I'd say so, yeah. I mean, he would say so too, by the way. He initially thought he was demon possessed. So I just agree with him. He thought he was demon possessed until his wife convinced him he wasn't. So why would he think he was demon possessed?
Do you think he actually wrote the Quran?
I don't know. Probably not. It seems like he couldn't have because he was an illiterate guy.
Well, he could have said it and then someone wrote it for him.
Sure, he could.
Have you read the Quran? I heard it's not that great.
Not recently.
Do you think it's a bit mad? I haven't read it. I'm curious.
Islam is way beyond the Quran, is what I would say. There's a lot of more authority in other writings.
Hadiths.
Correct.
What other books are there? Hadiths and what else?
The Hadiths.
That's it.
Yeah. Hey, let me bring Jacob on if that's okay, Sean. And thanks for the conversation,
sure.
Bro. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I liked it. It's cool.
Okay, thank you. Jacob, how are you doing, man?
How are you doing? Doing good.
Very good.
I'm just driving, so if you don't want to show my camera, you don't have to.
That's fine. I can. What's up? What's going on? You said something here that was very interesting to me. It caught my eye. You said, I thought murder was illegal killing.
Yeah, I actually agree with you that murder is unjustified killing. So you could take someone's life and not be guilty of a sin.
Of murder,
I thought that the general definition somebody had when they said murder, though, was illegal killing. Like if I argue with someone who's pro-abortion and they say abortion's not murder because it's legal, I thought that was the generally accepted definition.
Yeah, the generally accepted definitions are from lousy thinkers.
That's good. I like that.
It really is, man, because especially when it comes to the abortion conversation, in a matter of 5-10 minutes, their definition falls apart. Right, because then
I
it
agree with
becomes then legality becomes the thing that determines morality,
Yeah. Which
which is very problematic considering even the history
Yeah.
of the United States.
yeah, because then you can just say whatever's well in that scenario. If we just change the law to say abortion's wrong, then now abortion's wrong.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They
So
can't
why are
argue
they
against
complaining, right?
it. Yeah.
Yep. So it's
Um,
just generally more of a philosophical definition of it would be the unjustifiable taking of life, because we all realize there are situations in which one is justified to take another life.
Yes, I agree.
Um,
Yeah, I think we're in full agreement here. I just thought that definition was
Yeah, I
slightly
just asked-
understood differently, and I
I
agree
just
with you.
asked ChatGPT to give me a definition of murder. It says murder is the intentional and unlawful killing of a human being. That's assuming the law is against it. With malice, intentionality. There's 3 categories it gives: intentionality, unlawfulness, and moral culpability. The act is done deliberately, not by accident. This is why we have different degrees of murder in the United States. It violates the moral or legal norms of a society. Notice, I don't like the way it equates moral and legal there, but the killer is morally blameworthy, often due to motives like hatred, greed, and cruelty. Again, that goes back to intentionality, I think. So I don't know whether you're frozen or not there. Jacob, let me know. Agape says, I'm loving this conversation. On this episode of Car Theism. Maybe I should stream when I'm driving. And we'll call it on, we'll take this on this episode of Car Theism. As soon as you point out slavery, they lose. Correct.
Car theism. That's good.
Yeah, that is.
I'm a car podcaster.
Sepp is a hater. Let's just pay attention to him saying I'm assuming he's a Manchester United fan. This guy just said Manchester is greater than Liverpool. Bro, I think that conversation is finished with. Sepp. If you want...
It's funny to watch you talk about soccer. I have no idea. I don't know anything about soccer.
I'll convert you to be a Liverpool fan, maybe. So the funny thing here is that Sepp, you can go and look up some of your own legends like Gary Neville and Rio Ferdinand, who say that Liverpool is the most successful team in the land. So it's okay, man. It's okay. I know you guys are having issues there thinking about this stuff. The abortion supporter should also not have complained when Roe v. Wade was struck down if it's just a legal thing. That's exactly the point that Jacob was making, Ivan. Jacob was saying that once the whole thing changes, they should have never even argued against it, becomes a problem. This is where moral relativism, I have a video on this, and I interviewed Dr. Paul Copan on this and other subjects. There's a thing called the Reformer's Dilemma. And the Reformer's Dilemma is essentially we celebrate individuals that brought reform to their countries or societies as like kind of morally significant individuals who brought moral change. We shouldn't celebrate them because usually those individuals are a minority in their societies. And if we looked at it in the way that people speak about it, like relativists, then they would be moral deviants, and we should never celebrate them because they're going against the cultural norm. But we don't, right? We celebrate them because we all believe in objective morality, whether we admit it or not. It's hilarious to me that a lot of people who are liberals and moral relativists tend to be individuals who support individuals like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., and they don't see any problems.
It seems to me they try to they try to found it in individuals' rights, but they have no foundation for rights.
Yes, yes. And again, this is a
They can't
development out
found
of
rights in anything beyond themselves.
this is a development from Christian philosophy, and predominantly it comes from Thomas Aquinas. Like I said, natural law turned into human, what is it, human nature or something like that? Not human nature. What is it? Human rights. It went from natural law to human rights, which is a subtle difference, and a lot of us use the language of human rights without realizing what we're saying. I prefer natural rights because natural rights means that it is intended to be that way in nature and by the God of nature. So therefore, there's an objectivity to it. When it comes to human rights, then it's societally determined, essentially, and it becomes problematic. Let me respond to Tom Gonzalez, who's saying this. A couple of things, Jacob, give me a second. He says, how do you reconcile God's command to love our enemies with his command in the Old Testament to wage war and wipe out entire nations, including women and children? The way I reconcile that is by thinking about individual ways we ought to act versus governmental ways we ought to act. We're still to love our enemies. But what's happening in the Old Testament is the establishment of a nation, and the enemies around that nation, and then there's moral responsibilities as a nation state to defend the people within your nation state, versus as an individual person, you act towards people who are enemies towards you. This is not some, like, Tom, I'm surprised that you would bring this up. Partly because if you've been in this conversation for a while, I would say, not too long, you would have seen the distinction between the way we think about nations act and the sort of things nations can do and what the state can do versus what individuals can do. And we live in a society just like that. So I can forgive my enemies, but if my nation has an enemy, I could argue that it ought not to be forgiven, and that because then you have a moral responsibility to save your population. Now, I would, in certain circumstances, say even as an individual, I can forgive my enemy, but still have the right to defend me and my family. These are things that folks have thought through and written on and answered these questions. So self-defense, for example. I love how Sepp is acting like Man City do not exist, and he's just saying Manchester Club. That's kind of cool. Sepp, it's okay, man.
You're
it's
talking
okay.
about.
Go ahead.
Since we're talking about moral culpability in regards to killing somebody. This brings up a topic I've been reading about the past couple of days, and it's the topic of agency or free will. So us being agents. And I want your thoughts on the unification of free will, so we being agents who can act, and God's knowledge. So as a Latter-day Saint, I believe God has all knowledge. He could not be God if he did not know everything, because he can't prophesy, he would just be guessing, and so on. So God has all knowledge. That's clear through Scripture. But it also seems like we have the ability to choose. He tells us to do something, or X will occur, repent or perish, and so on. So we seem to be free agents who can do or not do a thing. And I kind of mean this as a bit of a criticism of the creation ex nihilo view, because in my estimation, if he creates us out of nothing, from nothing, he creates all aspects of us, our will, all the things that we are going to be put into, so he knows how we will act in any given situation, and he puts us in those situations by creating us. So it seems to make God the source of our will and the source of the things our will is the source of the things through which we get to use our will, and therefore we don't have free will in that scenario, or if we do, it's still all determined by God. How will He use it?
Well, yeah, I would just disagree.
I'm just trying to
that
make
it's
sense
all-
of this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Essentially what you're trying to figure out is a conversation between divine omniscience and free will. Now, I would say there's no
Yeah.
obvious contradiction between omniscience and free will. Because people usually will say something like, well, does God know, what's going to happen tomorrow? And I say, yes. Say, well, that means you don't have free will. No, it doesn't. Because I didn't say God determined what's going to happen tomorrow. I said God knows what's going to happen tomorrow. These are categories that I think get confused in a lot of people's minds in regards to God knowing a thing versus God doing a thing. God knows it because he's a sort of being that knows it. God knows the future. Now, there are different ways this has been, people have aimed at kind of solving this. You say it's a paradox or whatever like that. It's fine. Now, I hold to a position called Molinism, developed by a Jesuit.
Yeah.
What was that?
Can you expand on Molinism? On Molinism? I'm under the impression that William Lane Craig has the same view.
William Lane Craig does have the same view. So Molinism is essentially an effort to reconcile God's sovereignty with human freedom. And the way it usually goes is that there's different modes of knowledge that God has. There's different ways that God knows things. Let's say modes of knowledge. I think that's a fair sort of thing to say. And so one of the ways is that one of the things that God knows all possible things. So God knows everything that could potentially happen. And another thing, so that's his first mode of knowledge. Another thing that God knows is that God knows all the actual things that will happen in this world. So in the other one, it's more of a theoretical knowledge. Like God knows if he had created a world in which only ants existed, like what would happen. In the second one I'm talking about is that God knows what actually will happen. In between these, so that's first and third, in between them is what we call middle knowledge. It's essentially counterfactual. God knows what will happen if we were to do X, Y, and Z. So God's knowledge of that is dependent, you can say, and people argue over this word dependent on what kind of dependency is it. But God's knowledge of the situation is dependent on the decision we're going to make. So for example, suppose in 2 hours, I'm going to be presented with a choice to have dinner or not. Right? God knows what would happen whichever decision I make, which is to eat dinner or not to eat dinner. And let's see where I was going with this. The free will, the decision that I'm making in that situation in which, I'm going to have dinner, let's just say the decision I'm going to make is have dinner. So God knows that. But God's middle knowledge is essentially impacted by his other modes of knowledge because God knows all possible things. He knows all the actual things. So he knows all the counterfactuals. And God remains being sovereign in the sense that he still knows things. And we essentially remain free in doing this. Now, one of the things I've realized when it comes to the free will conversation is that not a lot of people define free will properly. They think when we're talking about free will, we mean that you can do anything you want to do. And I just don't think that's a good definition of free will. Clearly, we can't do anything we want to do. Right? You can say we can do anything that is
possible.
Yeah,
possible
like logically possible or logically possible based on our nature or something like that. But even beyond that, like, for example, I can't fly. That's not a free will conversation, right? If somebody, if you want to fly, can you fly? Well, that's not a free will conversation.
Yeah.
That's a conversation about my
Logically
nature.
possible, but not possible for us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a conversation about my nature. Human beings are not the sort of things that fly.
Yeah.
And so again, that's not a free will conversation. But there's other things like, could you dunk a basketball? It's like, well, I mean, there are people my height that can dunk basketballs, but I can't. So
Not with those knees.
yeah, that's dependent on a bunch of other things. So when people define free will, there's conversations about like physiology that comes into the free will conversation. I think there's things about like nurture that comes into the conversation. I think there's things about genetics that come into the conversation of free will and the reason why we make, people are born like predisposed to, say, drugs or alcohol because their parents were. And so you can go to that person and say, well, you have the free will to stop drinking, let's just say. Well, they do. Yes, I would agree with that. But it's going to be probably a bit harder for them to stop doing that, considering they have a physical dependency on it because of their parents. They can argue the reason why their parents. Say it. Go ahead.
I was going to say a part of that is using your free will can, in the end, limit it. If you choose to start drinking and become addicted to it, you've limited your free will through its exercise.
Or it wasn't them. It wasn't them. It was their parents.
It's now harder for you to stop or start doing a thing. Yeah, or that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have limitations to our will and to the way we act and the decisions we will make. There's definitely limitations to that. But it might be a personal limitation rather than a general human limitation, right? There are things other human beings can do if presented that I can't do. Even when it comes to like moral courage or something like that, like there are individuals that will, because they're formed a certain way, that will sacrifice their lives for others, and then there's individuals that will run away from that. And both of those individuals have made that decision freely, I would say, but it was developed and what's the word? It was nurtured and developed in such a way where when that moment was presented, they chose to do that. So I just don't think there's a contradiction between God's omniscience and our human free will. God doesn't know it because it's already happened. Like, so there's this kind of bleeds into some other conversations about like God's relationship with time. Like, how does God know the future? Now, I hold to a view that I would say isn't the historical view. I think I'm pretty confident. I can comfortably say that. The historical view, you could say, is something like what's called Augustinianism. And the idea there is that the future exists, God looks ahead and knows the future, and that's how he knows the future. I don't think the future exists yet. So I deny that view.
Is it? I'm not saying a actual distinction between the two. If God knows what will happen in the future, it's not possible for me to do something that would cause God to not know that, right? It's the same as if it had already happened, is what I'm trying to say.
Well,
it seems to me to be.
Yeah, to God, to God, it would be as if it has happened. But notice the qualifier there we have, as if it has happened. Because it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And the counter argument to that is, well,
I guess I'm just trying to say it hasn't actually happened. I agree.
Yeah, so the counter argument to this is something like, well, if I were to do something else, then that would make God wrong. And it's like, no, it wouldn't, because God wouldn't have that as a belief. Since God is all-knowing, he would know exactly the decision you were going to make. So it's sort of like a weird question to ask, to say, well, God knows everything, and he knows I'm going to do this. But if I were to do this other thing, so what? If you were to do the other thing, then God would know what that other thing is. It's no problem for God, right? The question really comes down to people saying, if God knows it, then I couldn't do otherwise. And my response is, God's knowledge doesn't predetermine you knowing it. Your action is the thing that makes it that, and God has access to that action. God has access to knowing that information.
Yes. Quick question. Can you tell me when you hear the word this? I'm trying to see the delay so I don't interrupt you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to ask a question.
I realize now that I didn't explain myself very well. When you hear me say this, say yes so I don't interrupt you. This.
Right. Yes, I heard you.
Okay. I think there's a 1 second delay. I just don't want to be rude and interrupt you.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Does God, in your view, God knows what we will do in any given situation before we ever do it, right?
Yes.
And before he created us.
Yes.
So when he creates us, he has the knowledge Jacob will do X in given situation Y, and then he creates me in the situation of the realized world. Jacob does X in situation Y.
Correct.
And,
yeah,
and you would say,
I wouldn't necessarily agree that God predetermines the situations. Sometimes he might, because he wants to accomplish certain purposes. But I don't think it's necessarily the case for everyone at all times.
You don't think it's necessarily the case that he predetermines something, but he might? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Like every single situation is predetermined. Like every moment of my life is predetermined by God to put me in that situation to do whatever. I don't think that's the case, but I think he might predetermine certain situations. So, for example, Jesus coming in the fullness of time seems to be a predetermined location, geographically and historically, in which God decided that the second person of the Trinity would be incarnate. And so therefore, because and be around the sort of people that he was going to be around, so the disciples and all that stuff, and one of them was going to betray him. Like that was, Judas is still responsible for the betrayal of Jesus, but there was a knowledge behind, if we put Jesus in this situation, this guy will freely choose to do X in situation Y.
Here,
meaning Judas.
Maybe this. I have a question that might clarify the question I'm trying to understand. Is it logically possible for God to have created a world where Jesus Christ is crucified and Judas is not a betrayer?
That's a really good question. And not everybody that holds the middle knowledge agrees on that, from my understanding. Some folks would say no.
If I don't know if the answer, I don't know if I don't know what the outcome of either option is, right? Yes or no there, but it seems to me if you say
well,
yes,
there is an outcome. So the outcome is a moral issue on God's part. So if somebody says yes, it's possible for God to have done that, then the response is, then why didn't he? And then now we have Judas in hell forever, right? Now that doesn't
it seems
necessarily
to me in
mean
that scenario where you say yes. Sorry.
Yeah, the response would be, it doesn't necessarily mean that if Judas didn't betray Jesus, that he wouldn't still be in hell. Like, I think that's a legitimate response. He could have denied God anyways. And then it could be that other people would have betrayed him. And then, so therefore, there's a lot of traitors, you can say, that there could have been. And then God chose to do it in this particular way. But there's people who think that God could not have done otherwise because he was trying to accomplish certain things. So based on God's ideas and the way he wanted the world to be, this is the way things must be, essentially, or at least in these major situations. What I'm trying to say is that not every situation, like, for example, whether I eat dinner tonight or not, or whether I'm presented with a situation to eat dinner tonight or not, at 5 p.m., let's just say, is not predetermined by God. I just think there's quite a bit of freedom when it comes to that.
But you think he does know which one will occur?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Maybe the point I'm trying to, or the thing I'm trying to question isn't very clear. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it seems to me, on the view that God creates us all out of nothing, that
I don't know why that's a problem for you. I really don't think.
Well,
it should be.
I don't know. I don't know if it is a problem. It's just something I'm trying to understand. So I'm not. This isn't like a hill to die on. It's just a point I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
If he knows everything before doing anything, before creating, and he actualizes a world, and he knows he knows what's going to happen because of this world, but he could have actualized a different world. It seems to me that he therefore is the agent, and we are just we are not agents in that scenario, but he is.
Yeah.
Because he could have done something else, and we couldn't in that scenario. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. I don't know whether the natural conclusion is that he is the agent and we're not. Maybe you can speak about like something like God is the first agent or something like that, and then we are all responding to his agency. So we all live our lives because God determined to make the world the way he has. And so therefore the rest of us are in reaction to that, one way or another. There is a criterion question here, I would say, is that if God chose to actualize this world, what criteria did he use to create this world rather than another world? And philosophers go back and forth on this, and there's really cool literature on it. Generally, there's a couple of things that have come up, like one of them being, well, this is the best world in which the most amount of people will get saved.
Yeah.
That's a view I tend to favor. I don't know if I would say like I strongly believe it, but I would favor it because there might be some issues with it.
Yeah, that would imply that God could not. It's logically impossible for God to create a world where all people are saved.
Yeah, I would.
And free.
Yes, it would mean that.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, so do I. I think freedom would imply that people choose the other, the opposite of a thing. It also means, well, then there will have sin in the world. I've made an argument before.
I think you have to have sin to have free will.
I wouldn't say so. So
the option to sin. Sorry.
I wouldn't even say that. And this might get us into the weeds in regards to my thinking about God and your thinking about God. But God has free will, and he has no option to sin.
Okay.
It's not so
because whatever he does is good. He is incapable of sin.
He is by nature.
Good is his nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you and I would say, those who will inherit eternity with God will not have an option to sin anymore, because our natures will change. We won't be the sort of things that will need that decision. But in the time being on this planet, that's there. And again, the argument that I was speaking about was an argument as to why God would allow sin in the first place. Why would God create a world with sin? And to kind of simply put it is, God has created a world with sin in it because this is the best world for us to experience who and what God is. And that's a world with sin. A world without sin would not give us the ability to experience the love of God and grace of God in accordance to God's nature. Yeah,
that's a very similar view to what Latter-day Saints have. There's some there's some Book of Mormon chapters. I think Second Nephi 2, if you ever want to read it, but they talk about the fall of Adam and Eve and how the fall was a part of the plan and a necessary feature of reality for us to become the way God wants us to be.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think Christian theologians have spoken about this for a very long time. I think that's actually a logical conclusion. That's a good logical conclusion, that regardless of the theological like even I'm just talking about Christian doctrine, that the fall of humanity was not some kind of an accident or something like that. Is that
It wasn't plan A and then you had a plan B.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people were still responsible for it, and we continue to be responsible for it, and then God's accomplishing His purposes throughout.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I would recommend you read this book. Let me just pull it out. This is a book that's written by a guy named Kirk McGregor, and it is called The Life and Theology of the Founder of Middle Knowledge, Luis de Molina. So it's a biography of Luis Molina, and you will... I'm not done with it.
Molinism, Molina.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's why it's called Molinism. It's very interesting. I mean, there's quite a bit of things I've learned. I'm not done with it, but there's quite a bit of things I've learned reading it, even about Molina and some of his views theologically, because sometimes he gets used in certain circumstances theologically that he himself might not have agreed with. But I think that's a good one. In regards to the time question, I would say there's a book called God and Time 4 Views that was edited by Greg Ganzel, and that's a debate book. So all the scholars in it are arguing back and forth with one another in print about their views. So that's cool. That's a very good starting point.
Conversation.
So it's written like, so they essentially, one of the people makes an argument, and then the other three respond to that person, and then he responds to their criticism, and then every single one of the authors does that.
That's cool.
So those sorts of books are very helpful as kind of starting points, because I think the reason why I bring in God and Time is because I think it impacts and influences the way we think about these things.
Yeah. I tend to think, just I guess as the summary on these two topics, I tend to think that all things are present before God. He knows all things, and that we have to have free will for any of His commands to make sense. And like I know what my son will do if I put a piece of candy in front of him, right? My knowledge of the event doesn't cause the event.
Correct.
But I still know it, and he still does it.
Yeah, I mean the only difference is that we don't, you and I don't have exhaustive knowledge, and God does. But again, I think that's a fine analogy that could be used. That we experience this all the time. Sometimes we get so close to people relationally that we actually do know what decision they would make given a circumstance, and we have no causal power to it. And I think that's a key word, is that God knows it, but He doesn't cause it. He doesn't cause you to do the event or the action.
My only disagreement is it seems to me that He does, given He creates He knowingly creates the world where that would happen.
Say that again?
If God knowingly creates world where action X will happen, and could have created a world where action Y had happened, it seems to me He causes action X to happen by actualizing that world.
That's fine, yeah. And so in Christian theology, we have something called the divine decree. Like, everybody believes in the divine decree. I don't care what the theological viewpoint is. And yes, there is that. But the question comes to, how much is God limiting Himself in His divine decree? Because God does limit Himself as to the sort of things that He does and doesn't do. Not the sort of stuff that He can or can't do, because that's a limitation of his omnipotence, but the stuff that he doesn't do. I mean, there's things that God can do that he doesn't do. I think that's like very commonsensical. Clearly,
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's things that God can do and he doesn't choose to do them for whatever reason. And we would have to argue that those reasons are justifiable. And that doesn't necessarily mean we need to know those reasons. God can know those reasons within himself. But there is this aspect of, I'm going to create these human beings, and these human beings will have a certain kind of freedom about them. And I'm not going to necessarily get involved in every single detail of those decisions. I think that's a pretty decent overview of the conversation. Unless somebody wants to commit themselves to fatalism and doesn't think there is anything like free will. But man, the problems with that view are so much in my mind.
It seems self-evident that free will exists.
Yeah.
And we have to just make sense of it. It seems self-evident free will exists, and there are good arguments to believe God exists. And we have to reconcile the two, not free will doesn't exist.
Yeah, and there are good efforts at reconciling them. And I would say theologically broad views, there are, within Protestantism, I would say, you can get conversations with a complementarian who's a Calvinist. More reform-leaning complementarians have a pretty decent explanation of it. Again, doesn't mean I agree with it, but it's a sufficient explanation. I think the more Arminian kind of view of things could, if their view of time is right, could result in a pretty decent explanation. I think Molinism is the sort of thing that could be applied both to the Calvinists and the non-Calvinists. And so there are efforts where this question has, I would say, resolutions. So people who go, no, this is an unanswerable question, to me it just says that they don't know the literature well enough, and they should. And then again, fatalism, meaning we don't have free will, totally falls apart. Predominantly it falls apart in something you mentioned, which I think is moral responsibility. Because we tend to think that people are morally responsible. God definitely thinks people are morally responsible for their actions. And so if they don't have a choice, then it goes against moral responsibility.
Yeah, judgment seems
Jack said, I think,
sorry,
what did I say? Did I not say compatibilist? Jack said, I think you mean compatibilist. What did I say?
I have no idea.
Okay, sorry guys. If I said something other than compatibilist, then that's not what I meant compatibilist. Jack caught on to that quickly. Thank you. Thanks for the correction there.
I like that topic. That's a fun topic. Sometimes I'll ask my work buddy, hey, reconcile these two things. And he's like, I just got here. Why are you talking to me about this?
Yeah. You got to be, even with the subject, I would say there are days where I'm more clearly thought out on it, and there are days where I'm not, just because, I'm tired and the time of day, what's going on. So sometimes I'm a bit more articulate on it. It depends on whether I've been reading literature on it or not, whether I can actually explain it better. His call got dropped. Maybe I'll call back. So yeah, it really, really depends as to my state of mind and articulating and teaching this. Let's see. There you are.
How you doing?
Yeah, so it got dropped, so...
Yeah, I know, that's my bad.
Oh, I said complementarian. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, it's not complementarian. Yeah. It's compatibilist. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. So, if we're not thinking about this, if somebody just left field asked me early in the morning, they're like, hey, what's your view on this? And I'm like, man, let's see how I feel in an hour and a half, and then we can talk about this.
I have an off topic question for you, and it's because I've got 2 minutes till I pull into my driveway and have to go. Um, as a Latter-day Saint, I believe the Book of Mormon is true, obviously. Uh, if somebody were to ask you what you think the best argument against the Book of Mormon is, so you got to rank top five, and here's number one. What would you say that argument is? And the reason I'm asking is I like asking this question to people so I can research that particular topic and see, what would be a response I might give or something like that.
What I would say is the best argument against Mormonism.
I want to the Book of Mormon. I want
Okay.
to know the Book of
Yeah.
Mormon in particular because the Book of Mormon is, if it's not true, then Joseph Smith was not a prophet, and it's
I get
like
it.
it's the
I get
keystone
it.
at the top of the arch. If it's off, the whole arch breaks.
I see that. I don't know. I don't know whether I would say there's this argument that I have that I would say is the best argument. That would be sufficient. I wouldn't necessarily
And it
say,
may not be sufficient to disprove something, right? But it could still be a really good
yeah,
argument.
I just think more so in regards to the claim. I think Mormonism, again, the idea that all the Christian denominations had gone far off, where there was this need of a new revelation. And again, maybe I'm not as familiar with Mormon claims. So I don't know whether is there a claim that Joseph Smith was prophesied in the Bible somehow?
Yes and no.
Okay.
You'll see an argument from the YouTube channel Testify on this one.
Yeah.
There is not a one-to-one comparison of Muhammad's prophecy about himself.
Yeah. I mean, Muhammad's prophecy.
I don't know. We can get more into it because there is something that I think somebody could construe that way, but
Yeah.
I don't have the time before I go home to
I would
clarify.
say like that. Those might be the sort of things I would look into but it doesn't seem like they're arguments that everybody might agree upon or something like that. But in regards to an argument where it's like, oh, so therefore it's false.
Yeah.
I would just say it's maybe a historical claims and arguments that are made is the sort of stuff that I would go with. So I'd argue it's like, okay, is the claim true that Christian denominations had gone so far away where they were no longer the authentic revelation of God, and then there's this need of this revelation by Joseph Smith. And it seems to me there's like two ways that Mormons come at this. One of them is that yes, they had gone and there's a need for this, and the other is, well, there was revelation in this land already, and so we're kind of continuing that trajectory. And again, that's not like fully articulated in my mind for me to develop it, but that'd be a conversation that I think would be interesting.
I think
which one is it?
I think I think someone could say if the Book of Mormon's historical, then that's independent of whether or not we taught that the Church Jesus Christ established was no longer on the earth, because it would still be a historical document whether or not we taught that. But okay.
Yep. Yeah, sorry,
Right.
man. I wish I had a better answer to that. But
No, it's okay.
I don't regularly interact with Mormons. I mean, you're a person who's, I would say, encouraging me in various ways to look back on some of these things a bit more seriously. So I appreciate that. But yeah, and so there might be not the best articulated ideas when it comes to the Mormon Christian dialogue in my mind. And again, that's just partly been because I haven't had a need necessarily. I don't live next to a lot of Mormons.
Yeah. I don't.
I think there's a conversation
where I was
going
gonna
on.
go
In
with that
there's no
conversation.
issues with people saying Mormon instead of Latter-day Saint, right? Like you don't have an issue. I know some people have an issue.
The prophet of our church said, you should look this up. Taking Christ's name out of our church, so calling us the Mormon Church instead of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is a quote unquote major win for Satan.
Yeah, it's interesting because even people just saying Latter-day Saint is taking, like every time you're saying it, you're not saying Latter-day Saints Church of Jesus Christ.
I agree.
Or like people shortening it to like LDS.
Name of
It's interesting.
the church. Yeah. This next time, but there's a push recently for using the name of the church.
Yeah. Okay, by the way, your video's cutting off and it's extremely choppy.
I gotta run. I gotta go inside, but I'll
maybe you'll be in the comment section.
Generally, we prefer the name of the church. But
got it.
Yeah.
Somebody asked what breed of Latter-day Saint Jacob is, and Jacob's like usually in the stream, guys. Feel free to like address your questions to him, and he can tell you kind of what branch he belongs to and all that. Okay. What is this? These pseudo-apologists, and they're unhelpful. What about your moral standards questions, man? C.S. Lewis covered for you lot over 70 years ago. You're right. C.S. Lewis did answer a lot of those questions. I don't know what you mean by pseudo-apologist. Is that a reference to me? Or other folks? I'm not sure, Jerome. I just wouldn't say I'm a pseudo-apologist. How long have we been on? Wow, what a fun stream, you guys. How cool was that? It was 1 hour and 58 minutes in. Had conversations with Sean, conversations with Jacob. Jeez. Jack says, do you think Mormons are Christians? No, I do not think Mormons are Christians. I think Mormons need to repent and become believers. I think their articulation of God is incorrect. But that's, again, some of the stuff that I think Jacob's, there's a number of things I've asked him, and he said, well, no, that's not necessarily what we believe. He's clarified things for me. So it's been really cool for me to be in conversation with Jacob. And he's a reasonable guy, and he's got really cool questions, and the dialogues have been really good. So. Okay, now I'm hungry. Now, especially talking about that whole, like, dinner will be presented at a certain time and whether I should go eat now. I haven't had lunch. I had breakfast. I had a big breakfast. I haven't had lunch. And if I'm going to eat now, I would prefer not to eat after that. Too much eating. So you think we should just quote C.S. Lewis? That's all we should do. I'm just like trying to take this personally. I don't know whether you're dissatisfied with the job that I've done, Jerome. And if you are, it's fair for you to say that, Arthur, you could have done a better job, man. Then I'd say you're probably right. Could have. Maybe I'm too excited over Liverpool winning the league. And I'm not thinking straight. Sorry, guys. every opportunity, I guess. Just let me have my fun. Come on. But I should say, let me give credit to Jerome. Jerome, I didn't realize this. I didn't realize last season. Jerome is amazing when it comes to fantasy football, Premier League. The guy is killing it, man. Like, I gave up 3 weeks ago. And I was like doing pretty good, like keeping up, like 60, 70, 100 points behind him. But no catching him, man. He does his research. He doesn't forget stuff. And so the fantasy has been really, really good. I'm going to try to arrange it for next season. Maybe I can arrange it in a way where we actually have a draft for the Apologia Center fantasy. Because I think the draft way is a lot better. But I don't know. I don't know how the website or the app works. Jerome is, look at this. He, in the fantasy worldwide, he's 1,500th on the planet. I don't know how many people actually play Premier League fantasy, but Jerome is 1,500th in the world. Come on, guys. That deserves this. Jack said, if you think Liverpool's going to win the league, you're certainly not thinking straight. Joking, I don't know much about soccer. Clearly, Jack, you don't know much about soccer because Liverpool won the league last week. So, tell me you don't know what you're talking about without telling me you don't know what you're talking about. Bro, we've been celebrating since last Sunday. Where you been? Oh, man. Okay, let's see. We got 22 people in here. Hey, how you guys doing, man? Drop a comment. Say what's up. Like, for those of you guys who haven't like commented and actually interacted. But this has been a pretty good stream. I'm gonna come back tomorrow. Just because it's been so good today, I'm gonna come back tomorrow again. Earlier in the day tomorrow, guys. Earlier in the day. I'm gonna need Jerome's help in setting up the fantasy league next season because he's so good at it. And then we're gonna promote it because we just want people to be in it, and maybe we can have a prize at the end. I don't know. We should have a prize. We should have someone get something. It's all good, Jacob. It's all good. Somebody asked what kind of LDS you are. What branch, I guess. What's up, Joshua? How you doing, man? Arthur, if I had a problem with you, I'd have told you. Unless it's about your sauna lighting, and then I don't bother. Yeah, well, it's not sauna lighting anymore. You know what I realized the other day? I need to take new pictures for the thumbnails because the thumbnails have like yellow lighting. Ivan. No, he's talking to me about me because I asked Tom a question. Apparently, Jerome knows everything about people like me. You guys chill. What's up? What's going on? He said the only one. Because Jacob, that's not necessarily a fair analysis. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So the Utah one, I guess. Yeah, y'all need to like figure this out. I haven't even looked at my phone. I don't know what's going on in the world. And ChatGPT is cool, man. Do like really cool research with it. Sorry, guys. I'm responding to stuff. Okay. Jack said, I wish churches would teach apologetics. Jack, that's what I do here at Apologia Center. Thanks for saying that. Because if churches can't teach apologetics, one of the things that we provide with this ministry is that they can invite me out to come and train people in apologetics. So if you got a church and you think your church might be interested in something like that, I'd love to come out and train folks in that. I've done that for other churches. Just sit down and talk, essentially prepare a curriculum for that church, and then go about it. And again, I'm not alone in that. There's many, and I'm not talking about like doing seminars and stuff like that, right? I have a question. I'll save it for the next live stream, though. Oh, that's tomorrow. We'll go live tomorrow. Well, guys, I think we'll call that a day. Thank you, guys. Appreciate hanging out with you and the conversations. And thanks to Jacob and Sean for calling in and having that. And all of you guys in the comment section so graciously interacting with one another and with me with all the comments and questions. Appreciate you guys, as always. Share out this channel, folks. Let's try to get subscriptions up and all that stuff. Where are we at? Let me see. Where are we at before we go? Well, lost some subscribers during the stream today. We're at 8,517. We would love to hit 10,000 this year by the end of the year. And I think that's doable. I think that is definitely, we can manage that, but need your help in sharing and all that stuff. So with all that said, God bless you guys, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.